And a very good evening to you. I am Lisa Lorde, and my special guest is the Executive Director of the Barbados Accreditation Council, Miss Lisa Gale. Thank you so much for joining us on your program.
A pleasure to be with you, Lisa.
Good to have you.
Thank you.
Now, jumping right into it, the BAC was established by an Act of Parliament in November 2004. Let's look at the main functions of the council.
Yeah, so the main function of the council primarily is we are the sole quality assurance body in Barbados. And we are to register and re-register institutions. We are to accredit programs and institutions. We are to make sure we inform the public on those institutions that are registered, those institutions that are recognized by Barbados. Primarily also, we have another function, and that is to make sure that CARICOM nationals, particularly skilled nationals, can travel throughout the region having obtained their skilled national certificate or their verification.
Let's go through your list of services.
Yeah, so we have about 9 services, and one is registration, re-registration, accreditation, re-accreditation, program approval, recognition of qualification of institution, recognition of CARICOM Skill National Certificate, recognition of institution, as well as we make sure that we inform the public, we issue information as necessary. Those are the main services. Attendant to those, we have some other corollary services. So we do equivalencies, we make sure that persons can see and verify their certificate, etc. So those are our main services.
You mentioned quality assurance earlier.
Yes.
Break that down for me.
Yes. So the essence of an accredited institution or accreditation council is to quality assure higher education institutions. We go through the programs, we go through the institution, we go through the running of the program, how the institution is set up. We look at the mission, the vision, the value. We make sure that they're consistent with what they're actually putting out there for the student. We make sure that the student themselves have the safe standard, the learning outcomes are consistent with what the school has identified. We make sure that the curriculum is robust and that it is consistent. If the person is in the accreditation stage, we make sure that the person is meeting the global standards. We validate the criteria of the institution or the criteria of our standards to make sure that the school has met those standards, and then we issue various certificates as necessary.
I want you to take me through the process of registration and re-registration.
Okay, so we have a number of institutions that are registered with the council at this moment. In fact, over the 18-year history of the Barbados Accreditation Council, we've had in excess of 100 institutions registered with us. At this point, we have a much smaller number at this point. To be registered, you follow the registration guidelines. You submit information on the institution that you have. If you are doing a course or several courses or several programs, you share those with us. You share your curriculum with us. You share the details of who are your teachers, who are your trainers, the qualifications of those trainers. We match them to make sure that you have met the criteria that we have identified, or specifically the guidelines. And I'm making a difference in here because registration deals with registration guidelines and accreditation deals with accreditation criteria. Although there are various criteria within the registration guidelines, but I wanted to make that distinction there. But within registration, they submit the information. We do a evaluation here at the council. We then assign a quality assurance officer to that particular school or institution, and they review the programs, they review the financials, they do a whole review based on the guidelines that we've identified. After that, we do a gap analysis, make sure that you have met the criteria that was set out. We meet with the institution's head to confirm explain to them what accreditation is, explain to them how we are quality assuring their systems, and then they send in some more information if the gap analysis shows that we need some evidential criteria. After that, we send a recommendation to our board. Our board then approves, and a certificate is issued to that institution that they are registered for either 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, depending on how many of the criteria that they have met.
Sounds like a tedious process.
It is tedious. Quality assurance is a tedious process.
No, accreditation.
Right.
The importance of accreditation.
Yes. So thank you for making the distinction, because In Barbados, we have two different nomenclature of recognition. So essentially what an institution is seeking is recognition. And the two forms of recognition that the Barbados Accreditation Council would deliver are registration and accreditation. So accreditation is when you've met the minimum standards, and accreditation is when you've met the global standard. And accreditation is far more involved. It requires not only the quality assurance officers at the Barbados Accreditation Council, but we also employ external evaluators who come in, look at your programs, look at your institution, look at your financials, and they look at your self-evaluation report, which you have to submit to us before the process is completed. And after that, and we go through all of checking to see whether or not you've met all the criteria, we then have a site visit, and that's a very essential part of the accreditation. We also do site visits with registration, but all of our site visits with registration do not require an external evaluator. We are moving to that place though. Over time, we haven't done that in the past, but I think since 2021, we've started to have an external evaluator for our registered providers as well, depending on whether they're applying for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years of registration. So in continuing in the process of accreditation, after the gap analysis, after you submitted your self-evaluation report, we've done the gap analysis, you have to submit some more evidence to confirm that you've met the standards. We bring then the external evaluator to do a site visit to verify that all you have put in your self-evaluation report is consistent, all that you have put meets and is true. Then we issue you with a report. That report, you then come back and determine, is it the factual report? Does it say what we told you? Does it say what we want you to say? Does it miss some key information? Then when they review the factual report and send back to us, we then send that to our board for approval. And after that, the board approves, if the board approves, because the board in some instances may not approve, and the board then sends you follows the recommendation and issue you with a certificate of accreditation. Those are the two different processes of registration and accreditation.
So after explaining both registration and accreditation, we only have 3 accredited institutions, but 21 registered institutions.
Yes.
Should I be concerned?
Yes, you should be, because in Barbados, we have way more than 21 institutions, but we have only 21 that are registered and only 3 that are accredited. What I'm gathering from you is that you're concerned as to why we have so few accredited institutions.
That is correct.
Yes. Well, accreditation is a voluntary process. Some institutions choose not to go the route of accreditation. One, it's extremely robust. It is much more expensive. Yes, it has its values. Yes, you are globally recognized, etc. But all institutions do not opt for accreditation. Why?
It's a tedious process.
It's a tedious process, it's a robust process, it's an expensive process. It is a beneficial process though. And our 3 accredited institutions, if I may, are the University of the West Indies Open Campus, University of the West Indies Cavehill Campus, and the American University of Barbados. Those are the 3 entities that are accredited in Barbados and have gone through their reaccreditation at different points. The University of the West Indies in 2013 was first accredited. I must say though, just to clarify for you, it is recognition that institutions are seeking. We use registration, which is a minimum standard, and we use accreditation, which is the global standard, as the form of recognition that we issue to these institutions. Some of these institutions, for example, the University of the West Indies, which had been established through the Royal Charter way back in the 1950s, they had a certain form of recognition already. The institution, Barbados Accreditation Council, only came into existence in 2004 by the Act of Parliament, as you mentioned earlier, and then started its work in 2006. There was a lot of work, a lot of groundwork, a lot of building capacity, etc., with the institution in and of itself before it could start to go through the systems with these institutions to get them up to the stage of quality assurance and building out their systems internally.
I guess the question that I should have asked would be, as head of the council, would you like to see more of the 21 registered institutions become accredited?
I would indeed. In fact, we have started one of the benefits in 2021. We had our first accredited program and that was with the Insurance Institute of Barbados. They would have reached out. They were on the books before, and they reached out in early 2021, indicating their need to move a little further to ensure that those students can take their certificate elsewhere and use it across the globe. And we worked with them. They had some gaps, and they built out those gaps. They were very eager. By 2022, we were able to have a graduation and issuance of a certificate, etc. In 2022, my desire would be to see all institutions in Barbados meet at least the minimum standard through registration. I must admit that that same act that you mentioned does have some deficits, because in the act, if you want to be recognized, you should come to the Barbados Accreditation Council, but there's no penalty for you if you don't come to the Barbados
Right.
Accreditation Council. So there's an entity out there who can choose, or there are several entities out there who may choose not to seek registration with the Barbados Accreditation Council. And there's absolutely nothing that the council can do, because those persons are not outside of the law, essentially.
Right. You mentioned that you look at the financials of these institutions. Why is that so critical?
Yes, because if you are looking at a school and you're looking at standards, when you think about it, a student is not only concerned about learner outcomes or teaching and learning systems and whether or not they can get information at a later date, or the information library systems, etc. A student also wants to know that after they have left the institution, that institution still is recognized, still has value, and their qualification still has value. So we look to make sure that the school can manage the systems, not only running the program, meeting the curricular design and curricular development, but also whether or not the school has the capacity to continue in its operations down the road. That's what we look for.
No, unfortunately, we know that persons pursue courses, even degrees, with institutions, and at the end, those qualifications are not valid. How
Yes.
often are you continuing to see that?
It happens. The validity is relative. So you could get a qualification for job purposes, or you can get a qualification for study purposes. So validity is very important if you want to go on at a higher learning institution. For the person who just wants to learn, just wants to understand something, and they want to go and do a job, your employer is not asking you for an accredited program. Your employer is checking to see whether you have the understanding or the capacity, the skills, knowledge, and the ability in that particular area. So validity is important, yes, but it has its relative importance depending on who the beneficiary is. Now, there are some qualifications that persons have achieved or acquired in various institutions, and they have applied to us for our recognition of institution or equivalency. We have come back to them and we have said, when we look at the comparability with our local qualifications, we do not have a local qualification that is similar. So there's no equivalent to your qualification, which means you don't know where you match up in Barbados. And that has been a disappointment for some, and we continue to see it. Even recently in 2023, January and late 2022, we have had a number of persons who were of Trinidad descent, and they were seeking to get a Skilled National Certificate with us. But prior to getting the Skilled National Certificate, we needed to verify the qualification, so we sent them off to get an equivalency. And they had done good training, good studies. It was from an institution, I would not name the institution, outside of Barbados. But when we did the review, it was actually a bespoke program. It was a program which sat, yes, on the UK framework, but it was not the program that was approved by the UK, the entity in the UK. And unfortunately, we could not, because it wasn't the accredited institution that was approved by the UK. And they suffered because we did not find an equivalency for them. And we've also had some locals who've gone to one or two institutions abroad, whether it's in the US or wherever, and they were unfortunate not to find an equivalency here. So yes, you have persons who may do a program and it is not valid in some instances, but it depends on what the student is looking for, whether they want to go to a university to, say for example, recently we've had some persons who are teachers and they wanted to get an increase through the Ministry of Education. So they would have written us, they requested the equivalency, and they benefited, fortunately. But there are one or two who did not, because the program did not sit on the framework with the UK, and it did not meet the required standards that we needed for comparability. So we did have some instances. It is not en masse, it's not in a large segmentation. When we look at the data, we didn't have significant number of persons who are seeking qualifications and then coming back and getting disappointed, but we did have a few in my experience.
I'm going to come back to the skills certificate a little later, but I know with regards to complaints with persons signing up for cosmetology courses, I know that's been a concern as well.
Yes, yes, we did have, in fact, we fielded calls most of February and March, because there was an external party who had come to Barbados to deliver a course pretty high in terms of the price the persons had to pay for the course, and the entity was not aligned with any entity here in Barbados. We didn't know whether or not they had accredited status or what type of status they had. And we had persons coming and querying whether or not those entities should be teaching a course in Barbados for the 3 weeks that they were teaching. And we said we didn't have any jurisdiction as the Barbados Accreditation Council over that entity to come here. The student has to check and make sure that they're getting a bona fide qualification. But we at the Barbados Accreditation Council, when we look at our act and we went through what our functions were, that was not one that we could have spoken to.
But shouldn't it be?
It should be. Fortunately, we are in the process of working towards sending a paper to the Ministry of Education. We have some draft legislation that was done over the years. It was done in 2015, but this is towards a qualification, a Barbados Accreditation and Qualification Authority. This would encompass the existing functions that the Barbados Accreditation Council would do right now, but also manage a framework. When we manage a framework, when we set the framework in place, we set a register as well. All institutions will have to be registered with the Barbados Accreditation and Qualification Authority, which is the new iteration of the BAC, and that would have new legislation which would then dispermit, for lack of a better word, or stop persons from doing courses if they haven't been subsumed within the Barbados Accreditation and Qualification Authority. And that bigger legislation is the better place for higher education in Barbados, but we are moving there. We haven't got there as yet.
And jumping ahead to that authority in terms of the legislation, I'm hoping it would include grounds for recourse in terms of persons recouping that money, those fees that they would have paid.
Yes. And there's a role that the Barbados Accreditation Council has to play as well in constantly informing learners or helping them, sensitizing them of the value of getting a course from a valid institution, a bona fide institution, and not just giving up your money just say you want to do a course, but why do you want to do this course, and who's teaching this course, and do these people that are teaching these courses, do they have the requisite qualifications? Because one of the other things in quality assurance is that if you have a degree, you can't teach a master's student. You must have a higher level qualification in order to teach the program. So there are some instances where there are institutions that have persons teaching, but they're not necessarily qualified to teach. And those are some parts of the quality assurance mechanism that we put in place to ensure that the student doesn't suffer and the institution does what it is supposed to do. That's a part of the quality assurance process.
Okay, so we've dissected quality assurance, registration, re-registration, recognition, and accreditation.
To some extent.
So to some extent, we have a better understanding now. Now, a few years ago, we had a few, and I say a few universities who had come here, set up, but did not go through the correct process to set up a university.
Yes.
Where are we with those particular institutions?
Well, fortunately, we have 7, and I assume you're referring to offshore medical schools.
That is correct.
We now have...
I wanted you to say it.
Okay, we now have 7 offshore medical schools that are registered with the Barbados Accreditation Council. At the time, I think you are referring to, we had entities that would not have gone through all of the right steps. Now, any entity that wants to set up a school in Barbados has to first get permission from the Ministry of Education. And it is in the Education Act. You have to first get the permission from the ministry. In the case of offshore medical school, the ministry then issues a charter, which allows that school 2 years to set up, which you will go through your processes, you hire your persons, you put your committees in place, you find the venue where you want it to happen, do all of the groundwork. In that 2 years, you're supposed to come to the Barbados Accreditation Council for us to start the quality assurance process with you. There are some schools that might not have gone through the right process and miss the step to come to the Barbados Accreditation Council. But what does the Barbados Accreditation Council do? We help you with your systems, we help you with your learning outcomes, we help you to put systems in place, your curriculum development, your curriculum design. We assist you with that because that's our function. After you have gone through that as an offshore medical school, we assign you or suggest that you go to the entity that accredits medical programs. The Barbados Accreditation Council does not accredit medical programs. It is CAMHP, which is the Caribbean Authority for Health Programs, for Medical and Health Programs. And that entity is the CARICOM assigned entity to accredit medical schools. There are some entities that have not gone to CAMHP, and that's their own doing. We encourage them to go. Anytime they come to us for registration, we also ask them, have you gone to the CAMHP and embedded in our system? In order for you to re-register with the Barbados Accreditation Council, you have to be at least provisionally accredited with CAMHP in order to run a medical program in Barbados. So all of the entities that are in Barbados, if they want re-registration, because remember registration is the minimum standard and you've just started, if you want re-registration, you have to at least have your medical program provisionally accredited with the CAMHP, which is the CARICOM body for health and medical programs.
So those institutions, all of them have now started the process or have gone through the process to be registered?
Started the process to be registered with Barbados Accreditation Council.
Okay.
I can name those if you wish for me to name them. So we have the American University of Barbados, which is accredited. I mentioned that earlier. We have the QCOM, which is the Queen's University College of Medicine. We have Bridgetown International University of Medicine. We have, don't let me forget, we have AUIS, which is the American University of Integrated Sciences, which is actually close to our new location here at George Street. And I think those are 6. I'm missing one. We have Ross. How could I forget? Rossum, which is the Ross University School of Medicine. I think those are the 6. Yeah, I think those are the 6. I said 7 earlier, but I think those are the 6. We have one that has not been registered as yet, and I will not call the name. Yes, but we have those, and they have all been registered. They've all gone through the external review and this is important. Remember earlier I said that in some instances we've not had an external evaluator for some of our registered providers, but in the case of medical programs, we have to have that external evaluator, and we draw on skills from the US, from the UK, from our Trinidad counterpart, as well as St. Kitts, and we've had those. It's called a team of evaluators, and they come in, they review the program, review the financial systems, review your self-evaluation report, and they've done all of that groundwork with those institutions. Some of them are provisionally registered. Some of them have had to have an extension because they haven't met all of the criteria for the medical program, and some of them are still awaiting review from the same CAMHP. Some of them have not all received the provisional accreditation that we spoke of just now. So they're in the process. That's essentially what is going on with our offshore medical schools.
Okay. Just wanted to get that out.
Yes, that's important.
Now, we're all on social media.
Yes.
So your officers are also on social media.
Yes.
Do you ever sit with your team when you see an institution set up to offer courses and simply just scratch your head?
Well, we talk about it. In fact, just not this holiday, but the holiday prior, we had the incident where Florida would have gone through, there was an exposure of a scam.
Oh, yes,
Several persons have been
nurses.
Yes, nurses. Yeah. And those persons received qualifications and did not study nursing, but they're out there administering medication and treating patients, etc. My manager of technical services sent me a WhatsApp. My information officer sent me a WhatsApp. My permanent secretary sent me a WhatsApp. I said to them, yes, I've seen it. And then when we came in, we didn't have a meeting to discuss it, but one or two persons would have talked about it in the office to see that these things are still happening. Scams are still happening. There are people out there who have ill will, and they're there to present qualifications. And yes, we have done, I think, 2 years consistently, we've done a series of discussions on scams.
You mentioned that your legislation somewhat limits you. So in a case now where you're seeing these institutions being set up, they're on social media, they're trying to get persons to buy into their courses, can your officers approach these institutions?
Yes, and as recent as 3 weeks ago, I had an instance similar to what you said, where social media, we get information, and I would have chatted to one of our quality assurance officers to say this is happening. I did receive a call on this. Can you have a conversation with her? And she said yes. In fact, I gave her a call and I told her this can't happen. But essentially, this was a provider that was trying to bring another entity in Barbados. We had the instance where a provider was querying an entity that was in Barbados, and I indicated there was not a role for the BAC at this time. The only thing we can do is distance ourselves from that entity, but all of the learners may not see us at the Barbados Accreditation Council distancing ourselves, and therefore they wouldn't see the red flag that we would have raised. So there's a little bit more information that we need to share with the public about these fraud mills and these diploma mills that find themselves in trying to issue qualifications when they are not legitimately qualified to do so.
How concerned are you about that trend?
We are very concerned because essentially what it does, it erodes the good work of the existing education providers who are doing the right thing. It also steals the learner's time, money, and investment. And this is not a good thing for the learner because they're the ones who suffer the most. It also impacts negatively on the reputation of Barbados. If entities are coming into our country, setting up shop, sharing information that they're not legitimately qualified to, and then misrepresenting the truth, essentially because they're saying this is what you need to be qualified in XYZ when they haven't gone through the full rigor. So yes, we are concerned about that for sure.
Yeah, but at this time, if you call me out for running a diploma mill,
that is why the act needs to be strengthened. That is why the new legislation is so important. We are meeting every 6 weeks with our stakeholders. We started back in January. We've had 2 stakeholder meetings thus far, and we are moving towards building out the framework, building out the system of credits, and building out the legislation, which will move us towards Barbados Accreditation and Qualification Authority. If by July, as I promised the Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, if by July we have made all of our meetings and we've made all of the modifications to what is on the table, we can then send that paper to the Ministry of Education, who would then go to Cabinet to confirm, and they would move towards finalizing the legislation and moving us to the Barbados Accreditation and Qualification Authority in short order. So I'm hoping that by 2024, we have our legislation finalized and the Barbados Accreditation and Qualification Authority can become a reality.
Because right now I can set up an institution, put some courses out there. Yes, you come after me, but there are no repercussions.
Yes, and there needs to be some teeth added to the legislation that exists right now.
Okay, well, still a lot more to chat about. Stay with us. You're watching One on One.
The Barbados Police Service is a dynamic organization which caters to the needs of all residents by providing excellent customer service within our communities. We are excited to inform you that we are recruiting new members to our ranks and welcome your participation.
We are building the Barbados Police Service within our communities. Are you smart, skillful, motivated, ambitious, reliable, and talented?
Smart to fulfill your life's dream.
Smart to chart career opportunities.
Smart to make a difference.
Smart to pursue economic sustainability.
Smart to enable change.
Smart to provide public service.
I say to you today, if you have a love for people, if you enjoy nurturing your communities and taking care of persons, then definitely the Barbados Police Service, of which I am a proud member, is the place for you. So I encourage you, lend us a hand, join us now to help keep Barbados safe.
Come join us, join me in making our country a safer Barbados.
Your place is here in the Barbados Police Service.
Come, join our ranks and chart a career of economic sustainability. Make that difference as an agent of change while providing public service as you fulfill your life's dream.
Welcome back. We're chatting with the Executive Director of the Barbados Accreditation Council, Ms. Lisa Gale. Now, before the break, Ms. Gale, you were describing or dissecting the various roles, functions, breaking down accreditation, registration for us. One of the main functions of the Council would be the issuing and verifying of the CARICOM Skills Certificate. And this allows persons in certain categories to travel and work hassle-free for the most part throughout the CARICOM grouping. Let's look at this process of applying and then finally receiving this valued certificate.
Okay, well, across the CARICOM framework, there's a free movement of labor, and it is facilitated through three ways, one of which is the issuance of the Skilled National Certificate. And in Barbados, through our act, the Skilled National Certificate is issued to CARICOM nationals by the Barbados Accreditation Council. In other countries, it's the Ministry of Labor. It is not the Accreditation Council. In fact, St. Lucia, one of the few, or the second one now, out of the councils, St. Lucia's National Accreditation Council Act, which was only passed last year, that will allow that entity, when they set up their secretariat, to issue skilled national certificates. Right now, it's done through the Ministry of External Affairs. So we have a different setup where in our Barbados, our accreditation council is the one that issues skilled national certificates, and that doesn't exist in Trinidad. Trinidad's accreditation council, they don't issue skilled national certificates. It is embedded in our act to do such, and it was the government of the day in 2004 that thought it best to join them when they were doing the act. I took you back there deliberately, but the applying process where the applicant would request through through the council to have the skilled national certificate. They have to supply us with a range of information, simple information, your birth certificate. You have to pay a fee of $100. You supply us with your qualification depending on the category that you are applying under, whether you are a nurse or a teacher, an artist, a general worker, specifically a security officer or a domestic worker or agricultural worker. Those three are the most recent additions. It would have started out in 2004 with 5 categories. But there has been, over the few years, there's been a gradual improvement to these 12 categories. Again, different to some CARICOM countries, i.e. Trinidad, they still have the 5 original categories. They have not expanded. So you see a number of Trinidadians coming to Barbados to apply for a skilled national certificate. The good thing is that the skilled national certificate is not only issued in your country, it is issued in the CARICOM region. So if you are in Belize, you can apply for a skilled national certificate. But a Barbadian wouldn't necessarily want to apply for a skilled national certificate in Belize because of the time period that it takes for them to issue. We have a much shorter time period here in Barbados within the last few years, we've removed the need for a police certificate of character, which was more or less impeding the process in the last few years when there was movement and there was a lot of complaints across the region where you're not getting these skilled national certificate. The hassle-free was not existent, or that wasn't the realized reality for some. So you apply for this skilled national certificate, you get it signed by a justice of the peace. It then comes through our system here. We review your documentation. We quality assure as well. And when we say quality assure, we check to verify that your certificates are yours and were issued by the entity that you said they were. After that, we then take it through the process of approval. It then goes to the chairman for signature. Sorry, we do a draft, we do a certificate, we issue it to the chairman, and then our board secretary then seals it. So there's a signing and a sealing process that goes on, after which we call you, you get your skilled national certificate. We issue a letter to the immigration department, to CARICOM, and you then go to immigration. If you are a non-national and you're here, you can go to immigration and get them to stamp in your passport. If you're a Barbadian, only when you go to a CARICOM country, another CARICOM country, you get that stamp in your passport. That's the process. And it does take a little time. For us, fortunately, we have a minimum of 7 days for the skilled national certificate, which is very good, honestly. And for the verification of the certificate, of the skilled national certificate, if you have one already, you're only getting it verified, there's a minimum of 10 days, but that does take time if we don't hear back from, let's say, St. Lucia or Jamaica. They may take a little longer. And then the process, after we've got back feedback from Jamaica, Trinidad, or any of the countries in the region that say they have issued this skilled national certificate, we then issue a similar certificate saying that this person is a true holder, and we verify the qualification. It also gets signed and sealed from us here at the Barbados Accreditation Council.
In the first half, we were talking about people that are out to scam others, diploma mills. So I'm sure that your verification process raises a lot of red flags as well.
Yes, a lot of could be relative, but we have had incidents where persons have said they are the holder of X qualification when they were in fact not the holder of that specific qualification. Or we have had scenarios where persons have a qualification, but it is not really a qualification. It is a certificate of completion, but they think that they should receive the skilled national certificate. Mind you, they didn't apply in their own country and issue those documentation to their country, but because they're here in Barbados, you get it a little quicker. They are knocking at our doors for us to facilitate. Now, we have been facilitating where practicable and where possible. But when you have not met the criteria, we issue you with a documentation that indicates you haven't met the criteria. And we would copy our counterparts, whether it is the CARICOM Secretariat here in Barbados, the Immigration Department, and in some instances, the police, because they're persons who have presented fraudulent documentation or what appears to be fraudulent documentation. And we have had to share that information with our counterparts, as well as the individual who has applied. Now, when we talk about fraudulent documentation, there are two types of fraudulent documentation. There's intentional fraudulent documentation, where a person issues you with information that they knowingly are aware is not correct, or they have received a qualification from an entity and they are unaware that this qualification is not bona fide.
Yes.
And that has been the reality in our existence. So there are some people who have an NVQ or a CVQ issued by another country. We do our checks. We do our quality assurance. We review and we check for verification. So we have a system in place where we either write the entity that issued you with the qualification, or we have a database where we can actually check to see who in the region has level 2 in carpentry or level 3 in whatever. And when we are unable to find that information, we then write the entity in the region and they come back and say, well, we did not issue this, that is deemed as fraudulent documentation. And we then tell you, unfortunately, we cannot issue you with the certificate because you haven't met the criteria. Full stop. And we've had an increase of those incidents in the last 2 years. In fact, we ran some data in 2021 and 2022, and we realized that given COVID, there were a number of people who probably fell out of their employment and they wanted another set of employment in another country, and they've gravitated to Barbados. We've seen, if you look at the data, we've seen a higher incidence of persons who did not meet the criteria. In some of those instances, there may have been legitimate persons who just did not meet the criteria, or there might have been persons who sought to defraud the Barbados Accreditation Council.
I want to go back and look at the categories of workers.
Yes. Okay, so we have 12 categories. The first 5 categories would have been media worker, teacher, university graduate, associate degree holder, and I might have missed one. Teacher, nurse, media worker, university degree, and associate degree holder. Those are the first 5.
All right, Ms. Gale, I want to go back a minute to the categories of workers, if you could list them.
Yes, so originally the contemplation would have only been 5. We had sports persons, media workers, artists, media worker, artists, graduate, musicians, and sports persons. Those were the 5. Subsequent to that, we added teachers, we added artisans, we added holders of associate's degrees, nurses, and then in the most recent contemplation, we added household, domestic, now called domestic workers, security officers, and agricultural workers. Those are the 12 categories, and all of them are enshrined in our legislation to be categories of which the Barbados Accreditation Council would approve for skilled nationals passing through the CARICOM region.
But that is not the situation in other jurisdictions.
In other jurisdictions, some people still only have the 5 because their legislation has not been modified, and some only have the 8, where they've added 3 more, which would have been the nurses and the teachers, but they didn't add the most recent contemplation, which is the security officer, the guards, the security officers, and the household domestics, now called domestic workers.
But
So yes, that is why Barbados is more attractive as a destination for persons to come to seek the skilled national certificate.
and that could be disadvantageous.
It could be disadvantageous to whom though? I would say it could be disadvantageous to the location here if we have an influx of persons seeking the skilled national certificate and staying here if they are not adding value to the economy. That becomes a challenge.
Are you seeing a situation like that?
We are seeing an increase. I would be honest with you. We saw, if you looked at the data, we saw a reduction in persons in COVID in 2020. In fact, our highest number of certificate applications would have been in 2018. We had 367 applicants or issuance of skilled national certificates in that year. In 2020, we went down to 100 and something. And then we are back up to the 200, and I think we went up to 200 and close to 300 in 2021 and 2022. The numbers are still continuing to increase. And we are seeing some changes when we looked at the data. In the past, it was the graduate and it was the Barbadian who was requesting the skilled national certificate most. That was the highest category. Now we have the Jamaican and the artist category. Artist encompasses hairdresser, barber, and those persons who are skilled but don't have a qualification. So those persons have been increasing in number as they come to the Barbados Accreditation Council for the skilled national certificate.
Is there an appetite for Barbadians to work across the region based on the applications?
Based on the application, we are seeing declining numbers. The analysis of the data showed that the Barbadian worker is not necessarily they're not applying for as many skilled national certificates, probably because they have qualifications and they have jobs in Barbados. That's what the data is showing. The data is also showing that the graduate category here is losing momentum because in the past it was a Barbadian who was a graduate. Now we are seeing more of them. Now we are seeing more of the artist category as the largest number trending for the last few months. The artist category is a category where we have more persons applying, and those are not Barbadian artists. Those are non-nationals, primarily the Jamaican Jamaica is the highest number. We've had fluctuation with Guyana and Trinidad. We also saw a significant increase with Haitians, where in 6 years ago in 2016, we had only one applicant, and that was a graduate for Haiti. Then we have seen an increase. Now we had 16 applicants over that time period, and a couple more we would not have done data for 2022. We have not finalized that analysis of data, but we have seen an increase of Haitian nationals, and it is not limited to any one category, but we've had a few with the graduate category. They're having a challenge though, because we've not been able to verify those qualifications, and that is simply because of the challenge in Haiti where we have tried to reach. We've gone through external affairs, we've gone through foreign affairs, we've gone through the Ministry of Education. We've not been getting the responses as we would like to verify those qualifications for those applicants, and that has been a challenge for some of our Haitian nationals.
Earlier, I asked if with the other jurisdictions perhaps only opening up 5 of the categories, well, we have all 12.
Yes.
I asked if that was disadvantageous. You were
Yes.
somewhat hesitant.
Yes.
I was asking from the perspective that, do you see a situation where this is unsustainable in terms of our own people then having these same opportunities?
Well, I wouldn't use the term unsustainable. What I would say is that down the road, we can have our students who would have left school, who want to benefit from jobs or whether it's entrepreneurship in the fields that the non-nationals are now being attracted to Barbados in. They may have a challenge with competition because we may have persons who set up their shops, whether it is hairdressing, barbering, etc. And the student who leaves Barbados who's interested in going into that field may see a growing number of persons that are not Barbadian in those categories, and then they themselves may not be able to gravitate to that space because the space may be filled already, or it may have
Saturated.
a surplus. Yes, a saturation already. So that could be challenging or disadvantageous to the school leaver who wants to go into that artist category. There is though a challenge where the cost of living is pretty high here in Barbados, but there are persons who are still hesitant to try an opportunity in another country. It is not as simple as getting a skilled national certificate and going to another country unless you have opportunities or you have an offer of a job by an employer. So the attraction must be the pull factor must be in the other country, and I must admit that Barbadians have not been that willing or that amenable to just leaving Barbados without an opportunity. They of course want to know that there's an opportunity before they leave. So that could be a challenge for some of our school leavers.
But this CARICOM skills certificate is supporting the whole regional integration movement.
It is intended to, yes, definitely. In fact, we've had a larger number of non-nationals in Barbados in the last 5 years than we had in the previous 5 years because of the skilled national certificate. And we can speak to that data specifically as it relates to the skilled national certificate. We have been liaising with the immigration department because they're one of our key partners. Because after you've issued the skilled national certificate, the person still now has to go to immigration for it to be stamped in their passport. And they have been also seeing the increase in their data as well.
Ms. Gale, as head of the BAC, what is your vision? What would you like to see in Barbados?
I think for me, because we are in the higher education space, not having the legislation not being as all-encompassing as it could be, where all higher education institutions are registered, they are quality assured. My desire would be to see Barbados become a state where all higher education institutions are recognized, 1, 2, that we have a framework in place where all students can see where they sit. And then one of my biggest desires, which is actually probably greater than just having the framework, is where persons who do not have who do not have either skill national certificate, they don't have a school leaving certificate, they don't have any qualifications whatsoever, but they have experience, where we can move to that PLAR, prior learning and recognition status, where we have a number of institutions across Barbados providing those persons with a certificate in what their competence is. Case in point, we've had several persons who have left school. They have acquired competence over the last 20 years working at a range of places. They have skills. They can actually manage on their own. They have understanding. They've gone past the level of entry level, and they are actually supervising, etc., but they don't have any qualifications. I would like our system to be able to facilitate those persons who may want to leave that job. They may want to see, where do I sit on the framework in the education scheme in Barbados, whether I'm at the bottom at the access level or whether I'm at the top where there's a doctorate. We have 8 levels in there. Where do I sit? What is my knowledge and understanding? Where do I stand? I would like that our framework is finalized so that those persons can see themselves, whether it is at level 3, level 2, they may be at the qualification level of an associate degree, you never know. But we don't have that system finalized in Barbados. It is into a nascent stage at this point, and I would love to see us move to that stage. A case in point, we have persons who come here, they don't have any qualifications, but they go to SJPI and they do an assessment. After they've done their assessment, SJPI tells them you're competent in this or you're not competent in that. They then come to us and apply for a skill national certificate. Our Barbadians are not capitalizing on that prior learning and recognition, that PLAR program. I would like to see PLAR spread across Barbados, where more people can go and see where they sit on the framework, more people can see what their competencies are, and then they can then play a trade, whether move into entrepreneurship or even small businesses. I'm more thinking of it from the perspective of whether they can go and study something else. My desire as well is for more persons to do short courses. Too many people are limiting themselves to a first degree or a master's, but there are so many other forms of training, so many forms of teaching and learning where people can become competent. And I would like persons to see beyond what they've known before and expand their horizon.
Ms. Gale, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with us this evening. We appreciate all you and your team are doing to ensure that when persons go there and they pursue higher education, that they have a valid certification at the end of it.
It has been my pleasure to share with you some of the work that we are doing at the Barbados Accreditation Council. I want to thank my team for making it possible. We are going to continue to work towards improving the higher education standard in Barbados so that we can move and continue to become that gateway of global recognition.
And thank you so much again.
My pleasure.
That was Ms. Lisa Gale, the Executive Director of the Barbados Accreditation Council. I am Lisa Lorde. You are watching One on One. Do have yourself a wonderful evening.